The Officers Federation of Minneapolis does not support private individuals or groups establishing unauthorized checkpoints, blockades, or patrol zones on public streets. Peaceful protest is a constitutional right. Activities or physically blocking public roadways is not.
So, in addition to setting up checkpoints all over Minnesota, rioters are now perpetually clamoring at the gates of the governor's mansion, demanding their sanctuary leader Tim Walz do more to resist the feds and remove ICE from their city. The only problem is the brainwashed masses here don't understand that he can't, and that DHS has yet to run out of illegal fugitives or Antifa gang leaders to take down, who we're now learning are actually the real leaders of Minnesota.
Thousands of others oppose ICE by driving around every single day looking for agents. They consider it their job to stop arrests when they can. Advocacy groups say they have trained tens of thousands of people how to do it safely.
According to immigrants' rights group COPAL, there are more than 30,000 people who are signed up as trained constitutional observers.
We find them every day.
We now have the resources we need to begin the work of identifying, disrupting, and dismantling these insurgent networks. As you mentioned, they're very coordinated. They have ICE spotters and ICE watchers. They use chats to communicate with each other, to identify the location, and then they train their insurgents on how to block ICE vehicles, how to try to free arrestees.
No, things are not calming down, and Homan was here for that.
Border Czar Tom Homan announcing this week that around 2,000 agents will remain in Minnesota to carry out what he called targeted enforcement efforts.
When we leave this building, we know who we're looking for.
Rapunzel, throw down your support for your voting base. Come on. You have a lot of lights on. Dinner's got to be done by now. We haven't heard from you in a very long time.
Wow, they are not happy with Governor Walz over here in Minnesota, are they? But what nobody's talking about is this right here is the eventual predicament of anyone who grifts off of mob rule, because eventually the mob gets out of control and ends up running the place. And this is not an understatement, as these radicals have totally turned against their traitorous leaders and are now taking to the streets, turning intersections into communist checkpoints while they drive around all day in cars looking for federal agents, wondering why Governor Walz isn't in the back seat with them as they try to protect Antifa generals from getting hauled out of apartments at 2 o'clock in the morning. And it was only a matter of time before Governor Walz found himself the enemy of his own people. You see, these mobs, as they radicalize and radicalize and radicalize, eventually they exceed even your wildest expectations and go completely off the deep end. But now you're probably wondering why Walz and Omar are out there stoking the righteous anger of these hordes. Well, it's pretty simple. They got a huge short-term boost in popularity from these radicals who wanted to see action against Trump and who wanted to be told they were fighting for the cause of righteousness. But then the mobs figured out their leaders were only willing to go so far and went rogue. Which brings us to the real reason the federal government is sticking around in Minnesota. Yes, after President Trump told Governor Walz that he was going to invoke the Insurrection Act, Governor Walz was trapped between a rock and a hard place, forcing him to make the difficult decision to turn on the mobs. Because if the Insurrection Act kicks in, the federal government takes over every aspect of law and order in Minnesota, including the discovery and shutting down of fraud dens and scam centers and the prosecution of those involved. Schemes these elected officials hope and pray they can somehow figure out how to cover up, something they won't be able to do if they are deposed of their power, which is why they're now being forced to cooperate, which, as you're about to see, is exactly what the mobs on the streets of this place do not want.
Resisting fascism a crime? No! Are ICE and CBP bringing peace and prosperity to Minnesota? No! Do we believe that the Trump administration ever acts out of any interest to ensure peace and prosperity for working class and oppressed peoples? No! Walz should know that there is no negotiating with fascists.
You know something? I feel bad for these people. They've been told since 2015 that President Trump was the greatest threat to our entire planet ever. But the fact that they're in front of the governor's mansion espousing hatred really tells you something, doesn't it? Because just a couple of weeks ago, Governor WALZ was the hero of the resistance movement powering socialist America. But today he's no better than Donald Trump. In fact, if you listen to these people, he's even worse than President Trump, which is quite an accomplishment, especially when you consider that President Trump gained the hatred and ire of these people by doing something America wants, by getting elected and doing what most people in this country want. But Tim Walz, he got their hatred by doing what they want.
Is remind people who Tim Walz really is. This is a man who in 2020, immediately after the burning of the 3rd precinct, authorized deadly force against mostly black and brown protesters. And the reason for this is that Tim Walz only sees some of our lives as worth saving, only sees some of our lives as worth protecting.
So in this guy's opinion, Governor Walz, he's been a sellout the entire time. He's never been part of the team, even though he was the leader of the team just a few days ago, because the federal government hasn't yet been toppled and still has agents running around arresting dangerous criminals who don't help our country. And if you're running Minnesota, there's no coming back from this. You can't, as governor, harness the rage of these people forever because they are totally radicalized and they're in a competition with each other to see whose views can be the most extreme, and you're gonna lose that competition if you're faced with something like the Insurrection Act, which means there's no way to ride this wave forever. And if you want proof that Governor Walz and local officials in Minnesota are absolutely terrified of these mobs who've just got them totally surrounded and trapped, look at who's allowed to live in Minnesota and doesn't get arrested at all until the feds show up.
Armed agents raided a Minneapolis apartment. It appears they smashed a window to get inside. Thanks for joining us. The White House says they took down a man who called for the federal law enforcement officers on social media.
This is when masked federal agents with long guns make their way up to the 3rd floor of this Minneapolis complex. And it was all caught on camera. You hear banging before you can make out a name.
Police of the warrant! Kyle Wagner, come to the door!
Minutes later, they take him away in handcuffs.
Masked gunmen, federal agents came in, and I did see them grab our neighbor.
37-year-old Kyle Wagner, a Minnesota activist, is now charged with threatening to assault and ICE agents.
That's who they found in this apartment. This guy right here. Look, it says right on his shirt, I'm Antifa. He doesn't care that he's being arrested, and this guy was on a mission. But the fact that people like this have embedded themselves all over these lawless sanctuaries, not just Minnesota, we've got them in California, we've got them in Portland, Oregon, it just goes to show you who the real leaders of this insurrection are behind the shadows, because these are the only people that can stay ahead of the radicalization of the mobs. You see, Governor Walz, he might be in charge, but then people like this guy right here who made threats against the federal government, I mean, no one's going to get more radical than him, and he doesn't have a reason to stop. He doesn't care about the Insurrection Act. And how do you have somebody who's a self-proclaimed Antifa general? Well, they're getting paid to be that person. Someone's propping them up. We know there's money flowing into these organizations. Some of it's coming from the federal government. Some of it's coming from foreign interests who don't want to see America function as it should, that's for sure. And what this reveals is the local government in Minnesota, this entire time, it's just been a smokescreen for what's really going on here.
Hi, Bill. The Justice Department using this as an example that if you threaten ICE officers, there's going to be real consequences.
There should be.
So as you mentioned, this is a self-described Antifa member now hit with federal charges for his disturbing videos on social media. We'll show you more of those videos, but first, this is him right here, Kyle Wagner. They arrested him yesterday early in the morning. He was proudly wearing a hoodie with "I'm Antifa" plastered right across it there. The criminal complaint describes the threats against ICE. Fox obtained some of those videos. You can watch it for yourself.
This is not a joke. There's nothing fun to chant about it. Get your guns and stop these people.
This is where ICE has come to die. We will identify every single one of them.
How is this guy allowed to walk the streets of Minnesota freely and be a general in Antifa? Who are out, like, what was he doing? Was he just having coffee at the coffee shop, having peaceful conversations with people? Or was he sowing the seeds of insurrection beneath the surface, underneath the cover of a legitimate government that's afraid of people like this and knows that they're out there? This is the entire problem with these grifter politicians like WALZ and Omar, who are getting rich and getting short-term political power. They think they can surf on top of these mob armies as they radicalize and head left, but eventually that ends. And eventually the sanctuary where this is taking place self-destructs because people like Mr. Kyle here are leading the charge off the deep end. And in order to avoid federal prison, Tim Walz, who's under federal investigation right now, better cooperate with President Trump. And you know how you can tell things here are really bad? The people that live in Minnesota have no idea what's really going on where they live.
The backbone of Minnesota's neighborhoods, economy, and culture.
United.
When small businesses are strong, our communities are strong.
Okay.
But Friday, these small business leaders say strength is fading by the minute. Operation Metro Surge keeping away customers and out-of-town visitors, as well as slicing through staffs at stores and restaurants.
Our businesses are short-staffed, short-changed, and overextended.
Well, whose fault is that? Is that the fault of the federal government, who's here arresting criminals and deporting people who aren't supposed to be in America legally? Is it the fault of the federal government for coming here and shutting down scam and fraud centers all over the place? Or is it the fault of these radical leaders who tried to appease the mobs by telling them, yeah, it's cool, we're a sanctuary, you can hire whoever you want, it doesn't matter if they're a gang member or somebody who snuck across the U.S. border and hasn't even been vetted, go ahead, hire them. Doesn't matter that the federal government says they're not supposed to be here. I don't care. We're not going to enforce the law. We're not going to turn that person in. Go ahead, run your business this way. That's how these people built these businesses. And now that ICE is here, they don't have any workers and they don't have any customers. That's a big problem. That proves that we've got a massive illegal immigration problem going on in Minnesota, bigger than anyone here admitted before any of these operations kicked off. Yet the people here, they don't realize that had they just been playing by the rules, had they hired legal residents who couldn't get deported, none of this would be happening.
Mutual aid at the expense of our own stability, our own families, our own paychecks, and our own futures.
We are hearing that some businesses might not be open tomorrow or next week or in the next 2 weeks.
Friday, Minneapolis Lake Street Council saying they've lost $46 million in revenue since December.
46
We're not going to
million.
recover in March, even if 2,000 ICE agents leave tomorrow. You don't come back from that.
Oh, did you hear what that guy just said? He said, even if the mobs get their wish and ICE leaves, the writing is on the wall for these places. They are finished. And as you're about to see, this has nothing to do with ICE or the federal government, because the same people telling us the streets are unsafe and that everyone's in danger and that nobody wants to come outside, these are the same people who go outside every day combating the federal government, proving just how safe it is to be on the streets of Minnesota. We've got people that attack the federal government out here every single day, and somehow they're not in jail, yet we're supposed to believe ICE is out there rounding up people for no reason when the people attacking them seem to be getting away with it, much to the chagrin of the rest of America, who's looking at this lawless insurrection wondering why it hasn't been called that yet. But this reveals something deeper. Not only in these sanctuaries do you have a critical mass of mobs, these individuals are actually a drain on their own society. If they aren't running a business which fraudulently steals from its own legal residents by giving jobs to people who aren't even supposed to be in the country. These people are running around ramming vehicles and creating checkpoints and doing everything they can to disrupt the normal operation of their own town. And these are the same people that have been following ICE around all year long. First they were in California during the riots in LA, then they moved to Portland, Oregon, then they set up shop in Chicago, and now here they are in Minnesota. You got the same people. It's like a world tour following ICE around as they go try to enforce the law.
And then they train their insurgents on how to block ICE vehicles, how to try to free arrestees.
That's what they're doing.
And then they dox ICE officers, they follow them home, they follow them to where they sleep at night. So again, it's a sophisticated insurgency involving a large number of radicalized, extremist, violent left-wing operators stoked by the Democrat Party. The resources and strategy is in place now, and you're going to see significant numbers. There's already been in the recent days.
That's wild. But hey, at least the White House knows what they're dealing with. They know what's going on here. They know that this is an insurgency, as it is correctly being called by Stephen Miller. That's what these folks are. You don't drive around all day in your car hunting down the federal government if you're not part of some insurgency. You don't train an army of 30,000 people to go and do this as violently as possible while claiming that they're peaceful, trying to rip people out of vehicles who are on their way to a deportation flight and not be part of some insurgency. This is an uprising. That's exactly what it is. These are people who are at war with America itself. And people like Tim Walz thought they could ride that wave. And then Trump was like, hey, listen, buddy, got this thing called the Insurrection Act. You better start working with us. And he said, oh, yeah, I better.
Now, Bill O'Reilly, host of the No Spin News, BillO'Reilly.com.
Where Fry runs. Look, if you continue, and I say you in a general sense, to allow states and cities to not enforce federal law, you don't have a country. It goes. Okay? Everybody should understand.
So then why is Trump backing down?
He didn't back down.
He's not backing down. He's trying to defuse. Why would you say he was backing down? You want a CNN contract?
Look, there's still 2,000 agents who are sticking around in Minnesota. And Bill O'Reilly, he's right. If you do not allow federal law to be enforced, you don't have a country, at least not in Minnesota. And that's why the place is falling apart. We got businesses that have built themselves on a foundation of illegal immigration. Now they wonder why they don't have any customers. Now they wonder why they don't have any workers. And they're complaining that it's ICE's fault somehow for enforcing federal law and getting people in America who do not have permission to be here out. But here's how the mobs are taking things to their own local government. These checkpoints that are out on the streets, these aren't a bunch of people that are just crazy. No, they're doing something very deliberate. What they're doing is they are usurping the power structure in place in Minnesota, and that would be the traffic system. They've got their own people out there making sure that they know who's who, checking who they are in their vehicles, reading their license plates, putting them into their database, making sure that everybody who drives down the street is an approved member of the right team. You see, that's what's going on. And yes, the local police come and dismantle these checkpoints, but then they just get set up somewhere else. These people aren't put in jail. This is allowed because people like Governor Walz are trapped in their mansion with these people clamoring at the gates trying to get rid of them. The whole thing is an insurgency. It is a left field socialist takeover of this country that even the most radical politicians in our country are having a tough time getting ahead of because the mobs are headed for the deep end and everybody knows it. That's what I think anyways. What do you think? I will see you in the next video.